Welcome, everyone, to the Meaningful Hearts podcast, where we discuss the everyday questions that make us or break us if we let them. With your hosts, Drew and Daniela. Take our hands and let's walk this journey together. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Meaningful Hearts podcast with Daniela and Drew. We're both back together again. I guess our schedules aligned this time. And today, we want to talk about communication, but in a different way. As I know we've mentioned communication in the past, but today we're going to get a little more detailed on how cadence and how the words that we use affect our everyday conversations and communication as a whole. And I think it's a problem in this world that we live in. And sometimes we don't realize that it's our own fault why we get the reactions and the responses we get. Like when I speak like this versus like when I speak like this. I might be saying the same thing, but definitely not going to get the same reaction. Is this correct, Daniela? Is this, am I onto something here?
I think so. Yeah, I definitely think so. And I definitely agree. I think we're not always aware of how we speak. And I think it's important to talk about it, to increase that awareness and then ultimately realize what effect we are having on other people or what effect other people are having on us simply by the words that they use, the tone that they use. Now, what is cadence? Isn't cadence tone?
I believe so. Are they inflections in our voice? I believe cadence is like how we say something. Are we saying it in an interested way? Or are we saying it in an excited way and very bubbly? It's basically how we use our voice to convey the type of I guess energy in the conversation. Because if I asked you, how are you doing today? You're like, oh, I'm good. Well, how are you doing today? It's like, oh, well, you're a little more concerned in your tone. It's interesting how if you could be that detailed, if you could speak in such a way that everything that comes out of your mouth is the words that you want to say in the best possible light, and on top of that, using the best possible, I guess, cadence, right?
Yeah.
If you can match those things up, you're a master communicator. I mean, that's not easily mastered, especially when you're on the fly having conversations. But I guess in practice, it's something over time that you could be unstoppable with.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I don't necessarily think people are always aware of what they're saying. I know there's certainly not what they're saying, but how they're saying it. I know there's certainly have been situations where somebody's raising their tone and they're not aware that they're raising their tone until somebody points it out.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, actually, I was not thinking of you when I was saying just now. I was actually thinking of a friend of mine who, when she speaks, she's not always aware of how. It's interesting. Some people don't realize how defensive they are in their tone. Their interpretation is that they're being very matter-of-factly or very straightforward, and that can come off as not mean, I guess mean. So that's what I was thinking about. But it does also happen with you. It happens mostly when you're trying to explain something and I'm not understanding, and you think that by raising your tone, I'm going to understand it. And I think that's a common thing, truthfully. I think people in general do that.
I think the one thing that every human can easily do, I think it's like a skill set, is when you get angry or you get annoyed, you speak louder and you could say whatever comes out of your mouth. And that's just the easiest thing that people can do, is frustrate somebody else or get somebody else upset. I think that's one skill set that everybody has. But
I wouldn't necessarily think that that's a skill set, because that's not something
maybe it's a poor choice of words, but it's something that everybody's equipped with.
Everybody does.
On the opposite side, it's like, how do you calm somebody down in a way, or how do you say something to somebody that's not palatable in theory, but the way that you said it just happened to be the best possible way, and they're like, wow, they're taking it a lot better than they could have.
Sure.
And it's like something that we just don't think about. I mean, I think some of the best writers are the best communicators, the ones that can write words, write the shortest sentences, but have so much impact and so much description. It's like the best words were chosen for each sentence, and be able to write a whole book based on just that. I never understood it until later on. I was like, what makes a good writer, an amazing, what makes an amazing writer an amazing writer? And through time, it's like, oh, that's what it is. That's hard. That's really hard. And it to be, it to mesh well together, for it to be exciting. There's so many elements that go into it. And I think,
do you think that as they're writing, they're saying it out loud?
I think part of it is in the practice of writing, right? If you are a writer, if you do write enough, I think that would help you become a better communicator, expanding your vocabulary, reading a lot of good literature, all these things. As you rinse and repeat, it's not like you just woke up one day and just had an amazing vocabulary. I think there are a lot of people that have become amazing writers. They read a lot of amazing writing, and they got those good words into their vocabulary, and they learned what those words mean. So you're using a better set of words. In any language, I would say that there's not a very high standard for every common conversation. It's not like you're having conversations with a certain standard of people. You communicate, you go to the store, you go here, you don't ask her, hey, hold on a second, before we speak, what level of communication are you at? No, you have conversation. So there's, we fall into a generalized level of conversation, and it's whatever the simplest way to say something is, or we think is, to get the point across, we'll do it. And we're lazy. We're lazy with it. So
that's a very interesting point.
We don't,
I hadn't even thought about. I think in my mind, I always try to approach people with kindness in my voice. Like when I'm at the store, when things like that, or when we go out to eat, I'm always nice in my tone and what I say.
Because there's intention there.
Yeah.
There are some people that when they speak or they converse with others, they're not aware, or they don't care. They're just, what they're saying, whatever they're feeling at the moment is the most important thing. And that's where the intention comes in, right? It's very hard. I think people struggle with intention, like waking up every day and everything you do is with intention. It's like, wait, people just dive in and go about their day. But imagine if you took a moment to stop and say, okay, what is the best way to do this? What is the best way to say this? I mean, it slows the process down, right? We want to get up and do the things that we need to do. And people are like, I don't have time for that. That I'm not going to do that. So it's a constant battle. I mean, dealing with speaking with my parents or speaking with anyone. I mean, on a daily basis, we speak to a lot of people. How many words do you think you speak on a daily basis? And how many people do you actually communicate with? Now, how many people are actually trying to communicate with you at the same level you're trying to communicate with them?
It's a very good point.
And it's like, so with that being said, imagine you holding the key and saying, well, I'm going to be so intentional that I'm going to remove the aspect of what I expect from them. And I'm just going to give it everywhere I go, everywhere I speak. I'm just going to use the best cadence, the best words.
I think I've, especially in the most, I think recent years, in the last 2 years, I really have honed in on how I speak and the words that I choose to say.
I definitely agree with you. I mean, I think your baseline is that, right?
I don't know. I think my base. Oh, maybe.
I mean, if you're saying 2 years, and and obviously I take all the credit for that. I mean,
yeah, pretty much.
I don't think I'm the best communicator. You know, full disclosure, I'm not necessarily the best. I know I'm not the best communicator. There are times where I have my moments. I'm like, oh shit, you're in it. But
I think it's tone for you.
Possibly. I mean, I do know that. Now, I don't want to go on a tangent here. But
before you go on a tangent.
Disclaimer. Well, I'm in sales. I do things over the phone. I do things in person. So cadence and your ability to speak and not sound like everyone else is the key to the whole thing, right? And because most people are lazy, most people in sales are lazy and they want to do it the easy way. They end up sounding like every other person calling. They sound like every other person making the approach. So being a student of that and understanding that, I have intentionally learned other ways and other approaches that will get me ahead of it. And I'm not saying that this is the premise of this conversation, but this is just one application in which we live in a world that's very lazy with communication. So if you just take 1% or you move the dial 1% or a little bit more and do something different, you're going to get better results. And that could be in any aspect of your life, not just in business, but in your personal relationships. And I don't think we put that much intention into our conveying of messages.
You know what's so interesting is that you're very intentional about your words and your tone and your cadence professionally, but I think in my experience, there are a lot of people who struggle to do that in their professional sense, because a lot of people, I think, speak at work how they speak outside of work. And it's very interesting to see.
The best is when you know somebody outside of work and then you see them at work and then you're like, wow, that's a different person. You laugh, you chuckle at certain moments. Just like, wow, you're so different at work.
Yeah, I'd like to believe that I am pretty. I just made a gesture.
Yeah, she made a. Oh, so she took her hand and she cut it across. She went.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty leveled in most areas when I speak, and I think something that I struggle with sometimes is hearing people around me hearing people around me use a lot of filler words. I think that's something that I really struggle with because I've tried to be well spoken. And don't get me wrong, I definitely find myself using filler words like or and the very famous like. But I definitely think that people, because their brain is so rapidly firing, that they just really fill it with filler words. I actually remember, if my sister ever hears this, I hope she laughs at this. When I was in grad school, I had to do mock sessions, and I used my sister as an example. And when I was recording, she used the word like a lot. And I remember sitting in class and we had to obviously watch the video and receive feedback. And I lost count after a few minutes of how many times she said like. It's something we joke about now, but I think it's very common for people to use like as a filler word. And even with work that I do with clients, when I find that they are using that word a lot or they say a lot, I will challenge them to say, hey, if you want to slow down your mind a little bit, I challenge you that every time you feel like you're going to say like or don't say anything. And time again, I see it's a big difference in how they speak, because now they're taking the time to slow down and be intentional, like you were saying. So it's very interesting how, even though it's two different, I guess, areas, or not areas, but two different points, it does come back to the same thing about being intentional, which is very interesting to me. I just rambled.
I would say that I'm around people. We have conference calls. We speak all the time, and I've noticed that there are certain professionals of high level that they do use filler words a lot. And if you, the next time you hear somebody speak, even the best one is sports interviews. Sports interviews are interesting. Listen to somebody who plays a professional sport and how they do the actual press conference. And you're going to be like listening, and it's going to make you cringe, because you're going to be like, wow, I didn't realize how many ums there are in that. There's a lot of ums. The ums and uhs are insane.
Yeah, they're very common.
Yeah.
They are very common.
Well, I would say,
you would say? Does that mean you're not going to say it?
No, maybe I'm using the wrong word.
You just reminded me of something so funny. We're talking about communication and the things that we say and how we speak. I had this teacher in high school who, what you said just now reminded me of something that would happen in class. So this is something that people do often too, or not often, but I've definitely heard this. When people are speaking and then it's somebody's turn to speak, the person will say, I was going to say. And so when we would do that in high school, my teacher would interrupt and be like, so does that mean you're not going to say it anymore? And every time I'd be like, damn. So now when people say that, or like right now when you were just saying I would say that, they reminded me of that. And I also just caught myself saying like, which is really funny.
There you go.
Yeah. I'm not perfect.
So what are some things we could do besides the things that we actually talked about already that could help us move past this if this is an issue for us?
Well, I would say that it's the things that we talked about. As you were talking, I wrote down some of the questions that you said, which I think is important and a start to leave listeners with. I was going to say leave readers with, but I think it's about the questions that you ask yourself when doing anything, really. But when it comes to communication and the way you speak in particular, I think the first question is, are you aware of how you speak? Are you aware of the words you use? Are you aware of your tone? And then continuing to piggyback off that is, I really like the question that you use of what is my intention in this situation? And what is the best way to say this in this moment? Or how do I approach this? Those are the questions that I gathered from when you were speaking. And then the first question was truthfully what led to having this conversation as a whole. I know that you and I are very intentional when we speak to each other for the most part. Sometimes I'm a little bit irritable, so I know my tone is more more down. My tone is more down.
Yeah, I know. I'm just kidding.
Your tone is more up. Like your tone increases. But I do think these are good questions to start to ask yourself.
Something we'll talk about in future episodes, but something you should keep in mind also is there are different personality types when we're communicating. Some personality types handle certain things different ways depending on how you communicate or how you handle it. So keeping that in mind is also very important, and that will add to your skill set too, because some people want a thorough explanation about something.
Other people just want you to get right to the point.
They want you to be short with them. So it's like, wait a minute, but you just contradicted everything you just said. Like, no, it's just the way, it's understanding how to communicate with people. This is not an overnight thing. This is not something you just learn in a couple of hours and you do it. This is rinse and repeat, read, write, speak to more people, maybe get a sales job on the side just to become a better communicator. I don't know.
My approach is really, or my recommendation is really just to start by asking yourselves these questions. And I wrote down the personality types in communications for a future episode. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I do have a PowerPoint for that, which I will send to you.
Okay.
Seriously.
Yeah, I know you're being serious. It's just funny. Is there anything? There we go with the see, filler words. We all fall victim to filler words, but it's awareness that's important. Is there anything else that you want to add? I think this is a good point.
No, we're gonna let them sit on this one and think.
Yeah, I think so.
So after listening to this, your next conversation is going to be very interesting if you're thinking about this.
Yeah.
And it's going to be insane how much different the conversation is going to go.
For sure.
We appreciate you all for listening, and we look forward to catching you on the next one.